what do you know about building a company, right? Do you ever worry about that, or do you feel like you understand enough of both sides to...
I've started marketing companies, agencies. I've learned how to hack into my neighbor's routers when I was a kid. So learning, HTML back then, and learning, how do you code based off the videos on YouTube and Google. And now that we have like a lot of these AI platforms.
For someone new to Austin, everyone keeps asking me, hey, how do you find all these events? It's not rocket science.
It's really tough because the community leaders want to be very protective. What is it that makes me fundamentally human? The fact that I have emotions when it comes to living my life in service of others.
So what's your question for a future guest? Hey guys, welcome back to Funds and Founders. Today we have on YJ. He graduated from the University of Houston, was involved with various communities around Austin. Ascend Austin is one of them. Executive Council Network, I think you're a founding member there as well. On your LinkedIn, you say you're chief fund officer of York's Game Pieces.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a lot about that as well. And then your professional career, you work at Dell. Currently, you're the senior program manager at Dell for Startups, where I think Dell supports and has a lot of programs for startups. And then a couple nights ago, we went to one of the largest AAPI events, which I think got attendance of over 200 to 300 people. I think largest that I've seen so far, but very involved with the startup community in Austin.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Something I wanted to start with is asking, why did you start working with startups? Is there something that excites you about working with startups? How did you end up venturing into this space?
I think it was always interesting. I mean, if I was talk about how I got involved, I think it would probably start when, as a kid, I was the type of person who just loved everything, who loved learning about everything. And it may have stemmed from potentially even an insecurity in a sense that I saw people who were really passionate about magnets, or really passionate about, I love swimming. I love learning about the different forms, and backstroke's my favorite, even though for me it gets water in my nose. It was just really intrigued about why people were so sure about themselves. And certainly there's a lot of people who aren't, but like had very interesting hobbies. And it always made me think about why you chose certain things. And why does that relate to startups is because like, as I kind of looked into my educational career, I struggle with figuring out what that one major I want to, as a lot of people probably had. And I remember talking to my advisors, like, can I just triple major in all these like different business majors? And they're like, well, just there's this entrepreneurship degree that you can apply for. So I got involved with our entrepreneurship program at the University of Houston, and got selected to be one of the 40 students for the Wolf Center on Entrepreneurship. And it was a phenomenal experience. We were given patents from the university to look to commercialize.
Nice.
Got to meet Warren Buffett because of it too, and had a really interesting conversation with him at the visited Nebraska Furniture Mart, and then the Omaha Steakhouse, and really talked to him about like how he was like as a kid and even now. And I think that was something of realizing that I love the journey. I love the trials. I love the challenges of what entrepreneurs need, go through. Like to be able to decide one day that, hey, there's a problem that I want to solve, and there's a group of people that I think would be interested in doing that, and there's no existing path to pursue it. Being able to pay that for yourself. I mean, imagine the sacrifice you have to make to be able to go through that. And it was just something that always interested me. And so when I graduated from University of Houston, I think trying to continue to see what that looks like for myself was always something that was I was interested in. And even now, like one of my favorite things about working with startups is just getting to know their stories. It's like, why this startup? Why this podcast? Why did you decide to do the things that you're doing now? Or why are you so weird? And it's like just like conversations like what made people interested in doing the things that they're doing.
Makes sense. And so it'd be safe to say you're working very closely with startups in various capacities, right? Whether it's the communities in Austin or via Dell. Have you ever thought about starting your own company? And I would say York's Game Pieces is your own company, but outside of that, like a proper SaaS tech company, has that ever come into mind or play, or is it on the back burner for now?
That was actually something I struggled a lot with, between loving entrepreneurship, but for some reason didn't care much about being one. And the whole thing with York's Game Pieces, York is my little brother's name.
Okay.
So in fact, like, he started and you know, being able to help him with this journey was really something interesting, and learning about how to work with family. How do you resolve these conflicts? I think that was one of the best experiences. I think me as a family, I had to remind myself that, you know, working on business together doesn't mean quality time with your family too.
Yeah, 100%.
You know? So I also had to learn that really early on. But all that being said, is that, like, with York's Game Pieces, I have 7 3D printers. We sell a lot on Etsy, Amazon, and a few other sites. If one day we stop getting sales, I'm not going to lose sleep on it. I think I realized, and it took a while to get here, was that I love learning about stories. I love collaborating. I love working with founders. I love being that person that can help daydream with you and figure out, you know, how can we make this better, what the future looks like. But I realized that I would love to be that coach or supporter.
Makes sense.
I think I have absolutely no interest in doing anything myself. I have no interest in necessarily even building my own business, unless, like, I've reached out to everyone and there's this problem that no one else is solving. And even then, you know, my goal would be like, let's help solve this problem, and then who else cares just as much to take it over and fix it.
Makes sense. I like that. Do you ever worry about not being able to help or relate with an entrepreneur because you've never been on the other side, or do you feel like you understand enough about the journey to be able to support? And the reason I ask is there's always that notion of, like, when you talk about VCs, right?
Yeah.
People will be like, hey, you're just an MBA grad who's signing checks.
Yeah.
What do you know about building a company, right? Do you ever worry about that, or do you feel like you understand enough of both sides to provide?
I understand enough of what I know and what I actually don't know. So when I do come up with questions, like, I also make it very transparently and clear to everyone. Guys, if you're asking me how to make money, we're both going to go broke. Like, I've never been in a position where I've had to ask for funding or to ask for investment. I've had started companies. I've started companies with friends. I've started marketing companies, agencies. I've learned how to hack into my neighbor's routers when I was a kid. So learning, you know, HTML back then, and learning, you know, how do you code based on the videos on YouTube and Google. And now that we have, like, a lot of these AI platforms, I can literally spit out the code. So am I the type of person who can look into code and figure out, you know, how do we modify things? Have that experience and acumen talent. Though, am I the developer? No, that's not my role. It's not my strength. Am I the person who is really good about asking for funding investment? No, also not my talent, not my strength. Now, I can work together, figure out how can we tell an emotional story so that we can be friends with these investors. But potentially, you know, when it comes to, like, hey, have you exited a company? No. And in fact, I realized really relatively early is that my role in life and in this world is to be a collaborating visionary that enables discovery for communities to see what's possible. And I share that with my family, my work, with my community, saying and telling people that the conversation, decisions, and compass that dictates and directs the relationships I build, the conversations I have, it's always about enabling discovery. And what I mean by that is that if you're trying to build a community, if you're trying to understand how to build something sustainably, and that could be for your family, for your church, or whatever religious affiliation, or for your work, how do we share with people that we can build communities in a way that's sustainable? I'm tired of social workers going homeless. I'm tired of, you know, potentially organizations that see community efforts as cost centers and not necessarily things that could potentially drive product insight or you know, sales or marketing.
100%.
And so I make it very clear and transparent. It's like, this is what I talk about, and this is the only thing I care about, and this is how I can support you. And everything else, we have a lot of friends.
Makes sense. No, I like that. I also strongly believe in understanding your lane, understanding where your skill sets are. Similarly, if I'm talking to someone, I can talk a lot about how to fundraise, but I'm going to caveat that by saying I have never done this. So this is my opinion. This is what
Yeah.
I think works based on conversations, based on people I've had on, but very corely understanding, hey, this is my lane. Here's how I can.
But tell me how it went, right? You know, you
Yeah.
asking like, you know, I've just shared this with you, but let me know how it goes. You know, was all my advice like complete shit?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
And 100%. And I think also early stage founders get the wrong information
Yeah.
from social media because there's so much content overload. It's very hard to know right from wrong.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I started this was I feel like entrepreneurship is a 5 to 10 year journey at the minimum, if not longer. I think the average successful age of an exited founder is 46 or 48 or something on the higher 30, higher 40 side. People, I run a software services company, and people come to me saying, I want to nap out in a month. I'm like, okay, to do what? Like, I'm going to get 1,000 users in 4 months. But I'm like, okay, what's the problem? You still don't know the core problem you want to solve. How do you expect me to build it for you? How do you expect you to go get customers? And the notion that, hey, everything's like just going to happen and fall. And I feel like that's the wrong story.
They didn't even have set that time to like reflect themselves.
Yeah.
And if you're going to build something for them and then they realize they wanted something else and you're just wasting.
Yeah, and then they blame the agency because hey, you built the wrong product, right? And that's part of the reason is I want to talk about, hey, it's a grind, right? Like, don't do this for the money. Don't do this for the payday. The likelihood of you getting a payday is very low. So do it for all the other reasons. Like you said, you enjoy the problem solving, the solution, and everything. Cool. How important would you say community is to the journey of an entrepreneur or a startup? And then what do you consider community? How would you define community?
I mean, great question, because like all of us, we're always part of different communities and it means different things to different people. All I want to share with people is the way that I picture community is, and this is something I've shared with people before, is like, imagine like, you know, your wife and your best friend, or two of your best friends from different industries, or two of your favorite coworkers. Imagine if they themselves had a great relationship with each other too. What would that do for you?
It would be a very good ecosystem of just
If your wife and best friend was really good friends, maybe they'll surprise you.
Yeah.
Like during the anniversary or during your birthday.
Yeah.
You know, what would it mean to know that the two people that you care about the most in the world also cared about each other? And what would that do for that relationship with you? And when you start building and expanding on that, you realize that even certain communities, we're not great at everything. Not one single community is good at everything. What does it mean when we bring multiple communities together and collaborate? There's certain things that they're really good at on their own lane. And then what if we collaborated together, you know? And then now we're talking about how do we build strong ecosystems, right? And in biology, we learned that, you know, developing and learning and understanding ecosystems is learning about how community of organisms interact with each other.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the beauty of a community. And even more than that, even at the core, if you looked at, and there's a TED Talk on the longest Harvard study review. I don't know, have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
So it's a 75-year-old study in Harvard that had over 3 directors. And what they did was they interviewed 200 men in the course of every 2 years, interviewed them, and they followed them through their life. And half of them were from Harvard, half of them were just, you know, some boys on the street and from other public schools. And they realized the people that lived the longest, healthiest lives were the people who had the biggest families and closest relationship ties. In fact, some of the folks from Harvard actually died really early. And so what we learned from that is that, you know, to live a healthier and happier life is how do we make sure that we build strong communities? Is it saying that, oh, well, what about the sacrifice I'm doing with a startup? Well, there's also a community of entrepreneurs that also understand that journey and can make it really easy for you. You don't have to do it alone. In fact, solo founders probably pissed me off the most. I was like, you know, talking to this solo founder who spent 10 years working on 10 years in startups and tech, especially, was like, you know, this, if you hadn't made any moves by now, I don't know when you will ever be. But even then, I would ask them a single question. It's like, do you think your competitors are doing this by themselves?
Yeah.
Okay, then why are you?
what would you say is the importance of finding the right community? Because like you said, there's a lot of communities, there's a lot of places to go. You also talked about ecosystems. What would you say is, two questions, what is the importance of finding the right community? How can that affect a startup or founder's perspective? I think you touched on that a little bit. And follow up to that, what is there a difference between having a community and an ecosystem, and when does a community become a thriving ecosystem?
Yeah, I would say that the importance of finding the right community is, as creatures who desire social acknowledgement and awareness, and you can think of it from like Maslow's hierarchy of like self-actualization, and I don't know how you can actualize or understand yourself without people.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's because a lot of our identities is sometimes even based off how our community sees us. And you can see this as a kid, when you, and especially your story about you traveling to different, you've probably had a chance to try out different versions of yourself with each community.
Yeah, 100%.
And you probably know this more than a lot of people, and I learned this too late. But it's fascinating that when you go back to older communities, they couldn't push you back into a box of how they perceived you. And so when you're ever trying to grow yourself, it's really hard to grow because sometimes the community, depending on the community, may see a version of you and feel comfortable with that version and may want to keep you there.
Yeah.
And so I share that because that can literally make or break your life 100%. By surrounding yourself with, by putting yourself with the right community. And there's, all these verbiages and adages that talk about, well, you're going to be the sixth of your first five friends, right?
Yeah,
if your first
like
five
the average of your
first,
first, yeah.
And so I think that's important. Now, the difference between ecosystem and community, when we look at different communities, like even in Austin, all the different startup communities, and you have the chambers, you have, the accelerators, you have the early stage, and everyone, all these community leaders have, a group of 100 startups and 100 mentors, and it's great because they all have specific skills or stages that they're catering to. Now, when I talk about ecosystem, when I talk about like how do we build a thriving ecosystem, this is no longer just a single community. An ecosystem is how are these different accelerators, universities, corporations, and media companies, the government, how are they all working together specifically for startups? So when we think about how strong is our startup ecosystem, I think about, well, how strong are the universities with collaborating with the corporations and the early stage accelerators and the community leaders that are just hosting events, on a monthly basis. And then, how are we supporting the women, entrepreneurs, and how's the ecosystem for women entrepreneurs? And when I think of the ecosystem for women entrepreneurs, I think of, well, how are we supporting women leaders and universities and communities? And so one of that things is that when you see cities who are very siloed, there is no ecosystem. There's communities, and there are cities that have strong communities, but an ecosystem is when they start collaborating with each other.
I like that definition. Would you say Austin's ecosystem is growing, is yet to grow? Do you have any thoughts on that? And I know a lot of people have contrarian opinions on this, but would love your take on where you think Austin lies in that. My personal take, just to give you, I feel like Austin's super early. I feel like there's a lot of momentum that Austin can use, but I also at the same time feel like it's not and I'm talking purely from a startup perspective, I feel like it doesn't thrive as much as SF or New York, because you need someone on each stage of the journey to be part of that ecosystem for the ecosystem to thrive. I feel like Austin's heavily weighted towards people earlier in their journey. There's not as many people who have exited, been there, been successful, who are coming back and in the ecosystem like, oh, hey, let me help you do X, Y, Z. That's my personal take.
And the funny thing is that that's like everyone else in Texas is like, oh, we should go to Austin, and then they learn about those things. And in a sense, I've also had the privilege to see how other ecosystems, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, and see how they build. And certainly, no one thinks about the Atlanta startup ecosystem. And I can tell you, Atlanta startup ecosystem is phenomenal. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from different cities. And all that to say is that you're right. I think Austin, there's been indicators the past actually year and 2 years where it shows that we've made a lot of changes on how we are collaborating with each other. So I'm really excited to say that, like, I think for the past 6 years, the last two years, and most recent years were 2 years when I felt like had made more changes than the first 4 that I've been here. And a lot of that has to do with there's certain communities that are starting to build up, and the leaders of those communities have a strong desire to collaborate with each other.
So I agree with that. I think it's sort of in the middle of, like, it could become really good, right? But at the same time, it could also just crash and burn in terms of just not the right things happening, right people. I would say the only thing I have not against, but what I see could be a potential downside to this growing ecosystem is when you're fostering super early stage companies, you need support for them. You need early stage funds. You need people who are going to write pre-seed checks or angel checks and not want traction and not want revenue. And friends I know who have been raising, who are relatively early stage, are getting that response of like, oh, come back when you have 20K MRR, right? But they're raising a pre-seed or angel round to go and prove out their validated idea. So like when they're at 20K MRR, they don't need to come back. They're going to go raise their Series A or whatever, right? I feel like when that changes, if that changes, I think it'll foster a lot more. I know folks who have moved from Austin to SF to raise a pre-seed round because they'll get lesser friction from an SF investor than an Austin investor.
We're a little bit more conservative. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. I feel like depending on the ecosystem that needs to be built, that might need to sway one side or the other, right? 100%. Because it's going to then dissuade super early stage from trying to come here, build their relationships and grow. Cool. How do you find community? How do you... So as a part of Dell for Startups, you've gone to a lot of cities. You've been a part of a lot of things. Do you have recommendations on how early stage founders can go and find community? And if you want to segment to Austin, we can do that as well. But how should someone go and find community? Because I feel like it's easy to find community. It's hard to find the right community for whatever I'm doing, trying to do, building, whatever.
I think it's the same thing as how do I find the right agency? Yeah. Right. Be very clear what you're looking for, right? And be very intentional on what are the relationships that you want to cultivate. And then in addition to what are relationships that you want to cultivate, what do you need to embody to be able to have those relationships? And so when I think of like, how is it easy to find community for me at my stage of my life? It's because I'm very clear what I want. I tell people like, all I care about is collaborating with visionaries to enable discovery. And I'm here to try to help community leaders to figure out, how can we be more intentional in our engagement? And just that statement alone, it's really easy for me to go to these different organizing associations and say like, this is my role, these are my gifts, and this is how I want to contribute. And why do I want to contribute? Because at the end of my life, all I care about is supporting underserved, communities with resources. And this is something that I'm taking to my grave, knowing in full well that every day of my journey, I move towards that. And if I'm clear in that statement, am I clear with what my wants and why I want it? I realize that there's a lot of people that will love to support, not because of who I am, but because of my purpose and what I'm trying to do. And so I share with people, it's like, if you're struggling with trying to find community, it might be because you haven't spent enough time introspecting with yourself of
what do you want?
What do you want?
How long did it take you to figure that out, come up with that mission statement and find that?
That's a long story. That's another like 2-3 hours. But the short of it was, tactically, it was end of May 28th of 2021. So it's almost 3 years, 2 years now. And I had a mentor who invited me to Arizona because long story short, I was going through like this huge midlife crisis where I was like, YJ, you're working at Dell in a corporate setting supporting startups. You've been doing this for 2-3 years now. Why are you not happy?
Makes sense.
I was like, you don't care much about starting your own business, and you were able to find a corporate job supporting startups. Like, not a lot of people have that type of opportunity.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. And it's great now because I have like the friends at Intel and Nvidia who are all part of a startup, and I can tell you that like it's a small community of people in corporate supporting startups. And I was asking myself, you got to learn, you got to talk with all these entrepreneurs and get to support corporate. Why are you not happy? And I realized I spent so much of my identity at work, in business and startups. I didn't know how to relate to people. I didn't know how to resolve family issues. I didn't know what community. I didn't have faith. I spent a lot of my years as an atheist until I figured out my relationship with the universe and with God. And I remember one time was because I had a friend who passed away, and this was a friend that recruited to Dell who, you know, his first month was like, YJ, love my job, love my manager, come meet my girlfriend. I was like, man, I've been here for like 2-3 years. You're dating someone already. You love your job. You're so happy. And it's like, stop fucking working, YJ. Like, come hang out at the pool with my girlfriend. And then he passed away one day. And his last conversation with him was him telling me that he was on a call with my little sister and helping her with a breakup. I was like, man, how's my little sister doing? I don't remember the last time I talked to her. And so that really made me very self-aware. It's like, I don't really have direction. Like, I think for all intents and purposes, I should be content. But why do I not feel happy? And I think a lot of people feel that way. You know, it's like, look, I'm working towards this, and then one day they have a midlife crisis and say like, I don't know what any of this is for. And this guy one day who worked at Intel at the time asked me how I was doing, and I just started crying. And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, why don't you come to Arizona and let me help you out? And he did this thing called a life plan, which is created by this Peter Drucker and Tom Patterson. And after 2 days, after the first day, I realized what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I knew it was a purpose because it was something that applied to my family, my work, my spirituality, my community, and then myself. And the second day was, how does that actually get realized? What are the tactical things to be able to live it? And learning what did I need to surrender of myself to make sure I live life with purpose. That week, talked to my manager and said, this is all I care about. This is what's going to keep me at Dell. Talked to my family and said like, hey, this is how we should be better at working together. And a year ago, we had a whole family meeting and we evaluated everyone's like, I'm also a licensed strengths coach, and we had everyone's strengths finders, their top 34. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's an assessment that identifies there's 34 talents. What are your top 10? And how do we focus on our strengths? And community is about how do we leverage each other's gifts to support each other. And my family had everyone's assessment and realized, man, it's not that we didn't try, it's that we struggle with certain things. My family stopped arguing ever since then. Me and my siblings have been weekly meeting talking about love, life, and business ever since then. And going to figuring out what faith means for me, and then, serving at my church, and then, learning about, other people's faith journeys and figuring out how do we support people who believed in similar things, right? And then also understanding like what this community mean, how are we working with students and everything after the 2.5 years. But what happened in that one day was introspection with my whole life leading up to it, all the turning points in my life, and realizing that nothing was necessarily random. Like all the times that your life has changed and with your perspective of life changed, and how that impacted you personally, vocationally, spiritually, community, whatever that looked like. Like if you were to spend time, and I truly don't think you can do this alone, because you need people to call you out. It's like, hey,
100%.
I think what you just said is a bias of how you're trying
100%.
to frame yourself. Like stop telling yourself that, like reframe it, rethink it, and realizing that if you look at your inflection point, like there's common themes, and people who don't spend time reflecting on that, they might not even notice it. I remember I was in like 7 different student orgs, in college. I was working part-time and I was volunteering at my high school. I had the most amount of volunteering hours. But I was like the dumbest kid, right? And I remember just doing random things and having random hobbies. Like my first hobby was photography, and then I played drums, and then I did swimming and all these other things. But then being able to sit and reflect is like, why is it that I did those things? What were some of those things that really changed my life? And you realize that they were all leading towards something. And this is what it was leading to: being a collaborative visionary that enabled discovery for community to see what is possible.
I like it. What's the thing you did out in Arizona? What did you?
So my mentor and my best friend and I can even call like someone who saved my life. He did this assessment called the Life Plan, which was a 2-day session to help people find his purpose, and he was willing to do it for me, for free. He was like, "Why did it's $10,000?" I was like, I can't afford that. But he was like, I feel called to help you with it. And I'm forever grateful for him and everything that he does and how he continues to pour into me. And after that, my life changed. And I realized without that experience, I would have kept working and, just not saying the kids.
Be a cog in a wheel.
Cog in a wheel and to extreme, maybe shoot myself. I don't know. It was that bad. And it's like all I could talk about work. This is how bad it was. Are you familiar with the business model canvas? Like
No.
the one. So there's a 1-pager business model canvas. Really good with ideation.
Yeah. I understand what you're talking about.
So
yeah.
I would print 20 pages of these templates out. So anytime someone came, this was 3 years ago. Every time someone came over, it's like, hey, like my first 2 questions is, what do you do for fun and how do we make money off of it? How do we commercialize it? How do we start a business off of it? It was so bad that like 4 or 5 years ago, my friend said, I'm coming to Austin. Me and my friends are getting a boat at Lake Travis. I'd invite you, but if you bring up the business model canvas, you're getting kicked out. But I didn't even say anything. And then like I had a roommate one time ask me for dating advice. I was like, first off, I don't know why you're asking me. And I pull out the business model canvas and I caught the word business and put dating. I was like, what's your value prop? What's your customer segment? What channels are you reaching? Are you Tinder?
You're just so ingrained.
I was so ingrained. I was like, was this helpful? And it's like, I hate you so much, YJ. I was like, I didn't know how to talk about anything else.
Because that's basically what you're living and breathing. That's just everything that you.
And then I realized why. It's because if all the changes in your life, the things that literally shift your perspective was always in business and personal, then of course you never knew. You never had the inflection points that allowed you to transform your family, your faith, your community.
100%. I love the level of clarity you have. I think that's something I'm trying to figure out over the next couple of months myself. But I think having clarity and sort of mission, vision, how do you get there, is the earlier the better. But I also feel like you have to go through some repetitions and, like, bad analogy, but like fall off the cycle a couple times until you figure it out, right? It's not, you're not going to do right out of college. You're not going to, have a banger idea.
You had
like,
to
hey,
fail.
This is the purpose, right?
Yeah.
But no, I love the level of clarity that you have.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah. No, I'm just like, hey, how do I figure all this shit out? But no, good thing that this is coming out in a couple weeks, so no one listening can hold me to this. But going back to community, how do you personally leverage community? Let's not talk about founders, startups. How do you leverage it? What do you like about it? How do you build that ecosystem around you that helps you thrive and grow?
Yeah. I think to answer that question is, fulfillment for me is seeing when people realize how much that they can do together when they start collaborating. And to tell you, my favorite moments were when I'm working with people to host events, and then during the event I would hear some 2 community leaders like, hey, one of them says like, hey, did you get that email that I sent you? Or thinking about like hosting an event, and I'd love to work with you. And they would respond back. It's like, no, I hadn't had a chance to look at it, but we definitely love to support. And this is, and you just realize that it just starts with being in the room together.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what really drives me, because at the end of the day, I know that if these two people are meeting, like the 100 of people, like both of them are influencing, and not even caring about the startups or potential businesses, but what about their families?
Yeah.
Like, what would it mean for their two families to come together and to realize like, hey, this is how we can support each other? And so at the end of the day, like for me, it's always truthfully taking myself out of it and figuring out how we can help people build relationships with each other. And that's what, for me, community building is.
Do you have a moment from the past couple of years that stands out as, hey, that was like one pivotal thing that you were able to help? No, I don't want to use the word influence, but like you were involved somehow, like putting two and two together and something great happened out of it. Did something stick with you over the past couple of years, or are there just too many of those?
I mean, at this point, there's a lot of them, but I remember a lot of them vividly, just, realizing my purpose. One of them was we hosted an event in Vegas, for Dell. And we had this whole, pitch tour where Dell was visiting different cities and tactically was trying to bring all the community leaders together. And also knew that, if we brought together, what it means is that certain communities that they serve may learn about other resources that also exist in that city. And I remember hosting like this pitch showcase in the city of Vegas, and then being able to follow a few months later, hearing from the University of Las Vegas, their Economic Development Center, was like, hey, we started hosting pitch competitions. Now that we know how to do them and run them, nice. How easy it was, it's like we started doing this. And then hearing other cities started, one of the panels that we did is the state of the startup ecosystem in multiple cities, hearing that people were also hosting and organizing these panels. And then also 3 years ago, I believe it was 3 years ago, I remember there was a room, at the Round Rock Chamber, myself, and then there's 20 or so community leaders from all the chambers, Capital Factory, and there was, Cherie from Fiesta. There was a bunch of people, Mark Nathan was there as well, like all in that one room. And the question to everyone was, what are challenges? Why are we not working together? What are the things that we could be struggling with? It was the first time a lot of these community leaders, even though we see each other at our own events, like was intentionally in this room together to talk about what can we be doing to help Austin out. And I remember someone coming out to me and was like, YJ, we tried doing this 10 years ago, but like it's just falling apart. I was like, I'm glad it's being brought back again. I hope it continues. And if anything, whether or not it continues today, it was like having that meeting to share, like, hey, we're all here. Like we all live here. Austin's such a small city geographically. Like, guys, it doesn't take long to see each other. It's not that hard to meet. And to talk about, here are the shared challenges, opportunities. And then stemming from that conversation, someone started hosting a get-together for Austin women entrepreneurs, led by Leslie Robinson, right? And so slowly there's these seeds that get planted, these meetings that get planted, just because we're putting people in the same room. And so there's multiple examples of that and all across the US that we support.
Nice. I like that. I feel like, I think Mark mentioned this. I had him on early in one of the first 5 episodes. And he talks about how one of the issues that Austin has is, one is discoverability, right? I've been going to events every day for the past year and a half or 2. So I have a system to find events. I still don't find all of them, but there's stuff I can find more than the average. Mark was talking about how someone tried to make like a Austin tech calendar, but the place that it falls short is people start getting political about, okay, who decides what goes on that central calendar? Who's the deciding org, right? Who decides whether a startup thing goes on a tech thing or like an e-com thing goes? And that's where it starts falling short. So I know a bunch of people who are trying to make like calendars, but I feel like discoverability of such events to then go find the community is also a partial challenge. It's not like a big challenge, but it's for someone new to Austin. Everyone keeps asking me, hey, how do you find all these events? It's not rocket science. Like, once you know where to look, there's probably only 20 or 30 like web pages to look at. But
really tough because the community leaders want to be very protective.
Yeah.
And for all the right reasons, we want to make sure that we're creating shared values, and we're making sure that we're protecting our internal members from, you know, potentially bad actors. But there's also this level of, let's just trust that our members know exactly like what they look for. They can weed themselves, and maybe there's a community that's actually better for them.
Yeah.
And if we want to talk about ecosystem at a community level, sure, you know, gatekeep all you want, right? You know, I see boundaries, healthy boundaries, as a good thing, not necessarily to exclude people out, but to show like this is how the right people can be part of my community.
100%.
But if we're talking about it from a city level, like, hey, if we're trying to build ecosystem, there's no gatekeeping involved. You know, naturally with a city as small as Austin geographically, people will know who the good people are.
Yeah.
People talk. It's such a small community. We know who the good actors, the bad actors, people with good intentions, people with bad intentions. We also know when people start growing and changing, right? And it's like, hey, this person might have not been that great, but I see over time that they've been softening up and being like a lot more supportive, and we give people grace. And so when it comes to sharing, it's like, look, if this is a community calendar, great. But if you're trying to say that you're supporting the ecosystem, that's not the way to do it. Because you're right. There's a lot of people that are very political about it, and, you know, for all the good intentions, but that doesn't help.
100%. And I feel like, to your point, if someone's a bad actor, they'll show up to maybe one event, two event, but in like the grand scheme of things, I would rather let 50 more people find and come to my event every time, even though there's high churn. But I want to then find those one or two or three people who add value, who need help, who need support. And but like, it's one of those like discoverability problems of, it's going to take a lot longer if you do two at a time versus if you do like 50, 60 at a time.
Maybe it could also be a scarcity thing. It's like, what if Abhinav leaves my community? It's like, well, if he leaves, then it's probably because he found someplace like he'd rather be in.
Yeah, 100%.
It's okay. Yeah. Like, you rather have people like who explore the world and decide to come back to you.
Yeah.
Like, those are people I'd rather be with.
Yeah.
Right? People who, out of all the options that they knew existed, they still decide to hang out with me.
100%. I'm a part of a lot of Slack groups, a lot of Slack communities. I'm barely active in any of them. But at any given point in time, there's one thing top of mind for me, and I will go to the community that supports that.
Yeah.
Right. And because all these communities are focused on certain parts of life. Right. But 100% agree that there's times when someone graduates, they move on. If there's a community for builders, at some point you've built, executed, and you're not a builder anymore. It doesn't make sense for you to be part of a community of builders if, you know, you're relaxing in life right now. But 100% agree. Do you have any recommendations for local Austinites, early stage folks? Where can they start? Do you have anything off the top of your head where you're like, hey, check out these one or two or three places, communities, resources?
I think there's a lot. I think the Austin Stars Facebook group is one. I think Sherry does a really great job with the Fiesta events. I think a lot of chambers, they may be a little bit scope, but they're also kept in loop with all the things that are happening in the city. And
I didn't even know there's so many chambers. I knew there was a lot of chambers. I didn't know there were so many until I came to the event the other day. I was like, okay, I didn't know there was an Indian chamber. I was like,
we have a lot of minority chambers, and my favorite part is that there's this organization called DECA, which is consisted of the LGBT, the Hispanic, the Black, the Asian, feel like the Latino chambers, and they all meet regularly to talk about how they can support each other too. And so there's a lot of different communities and groups, and even in the startups world. But you know, if you're new to Austin, probably the first one is just engage with some of these Slack channels. The Austin Startups Facebook group is a great community. And then Fiesta is also a great community to start and see which direction you want to go. And like my advice is be clear. Even if you don't know what you want, tell people like, hey, I really don't know what I'm doing right here, or I really don't know what direction, but I'm trying to figure that out. And if you even just, and at least that you're clear on.
I think Austin people are a lot more supportive. I feel like if in any Austin community you're like, I'm winging it, I'm trying to figure shit out, more people be like, oh, can I help you with XYZ? Versus you don't get that vibe in SF or New York as much because they're more like hit the ground running kind of places. Austin's more like, you know, I could use some help in XYZ, and people are like, oh yeah, why don't I help you? I'll you know, I'll spend a couple hours, get you off the ground. I feel like that's a very Austin thing.
Yeah, very Texas thing too.
Yeah. I like ending a lot of my episodes with a couple questions I have for folks.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to ask you was, what would you say is your support system? I think you covered part of it throughout, but what would you say is your support system that allows you to stay driven, motivated, be on your mission?
My partner, for sure. She's the type of person, not anything with startups. She's the type of person that's really good about grounding me.
Okay.
Family, certainly. My mentor, who still continues to check in on me every single week, who I constantly just am amazed that he's willing to spend and invest in time. And it feels weird. I was like, I'm not deserving of this. And for him, it's like, I'm just doing my purpose. It's like, my purpose right now is calling me to support you. And I shared with them, like, there's no way I can pay him back. The only way that I can pay him back is to really just pay it forward, and in the best way that I know how. And I think just realizing that these affirmations, like when people come up to me, it's like, why did you like this? This means a lot. It's like, even if, and I can probably share this with, you know, all the community leaders probably feel the same way. Like, sure, sometimes we're hosting events, we're running around, you know, trying to meet people, trying to get people included. But if you spend time and just like go up to them and say like, hey, this is what you did for me, whether or not you were intentional about it, that's so helpful, and that's so affirming, that gives us the encouragement to continue to keep going, because it is all at work. I don't think anyone, you know, one day decided like, hey, you know, I want to have all the challenges and problems that comes, and all the drama and politics that come with running an event that has 900 people on there and 12 community leaders. It's like, it's a lot of work, and if you take it personally, you're gonna lose white hair. I mean, you know, it's similar to like, who runs the biggest community in the US is, you know, our president. And you know, you look at those 4-year transitions and they're like, wow, it looks like you aged like 20 years. And similarly, every single community leader, I mean, when they do it, it's very personal for them. So for the community leaders, for the community members to share with them like, hey, this is what it did for me.
100%.
And that really supports and drives us.
Nice. I like that. What are 3 resource recommendations you have for folks early in their journey, or folks looking for community, or folks local to Austin? Pick whatever you want. Just 3 resources. They can be groups, books, communities, blogs, pocket, whatever.
There's one thing to take away from this is, you hear it in my conversation, you hear it and the value that communities bring, but finding the right people in your life.
Yeah.
And I've shared this where I call it the 4 P's of mentoring. There's 4 types of mentor relationships that you should have. One's a professional mentor. So anyone that's doing something that you see yourself potentially interested in, every single title, job, or industry, find a professional mentor. It's people with 10, 20 years of experience. You know, it could be a startup founder, serial entrepreneur, it could be an investor, you know, it could be, you know, a governor, you know, whatever it is. Professional mentor is someone who has experience in those fields and titles and roles. You also need a personal mentor, someone who shares with you that life isn't about work. Make sure you bring your mom flowers for Mother's Day. Make sure you check in with your dad. Make sure, you know, your siblings are okay. When's the last time you talked to your siblings? Like, I don't know. It's like, well, maybe we should fix that. So a personal mentor who kind of makes sure that you're living life holistically, someone who even encourages you that, hey, when's the last time you worked out? That's what my mentor does for
100%.
me. A peer, someone who has maybe a few years of experience. Not necessarily, it could be someone who's at the same organization, who's a senior. If you're a freshman, it's a senior. If you're in corporate, it could be someone in a different team who's been at that company a little bit longer. Someone who can help you navigate your current life stage. Someone who has relevant information about what you're going through right now. And then a protege, someone that you're teaching. Why? Because like the advice that you're giving to them, they're going to apply it to something else, and they'll come back to you and tell you if it's a good idea or not. It's like, hey, YJ, like the advice you gave me, it worked really well in this industry that I didn't even like know that existed.
Yeah.
Or YJ, that advice was shit. Like that didn't help. I was like, oh, well, did you do this? And what we learned from that is affirming in our learnings and wisdom to check if our own wisdom is applicable in different areas, but also teaches us how to be better mentees.
I like that. Never heard the 4 P's before, but I like that. I've talked about I've talked with some friends that I've thought about setting up like an advisory board for myself.
Yep.
Which is people whose opinions I trust, whose way of thinking I trust, slightly different facets, right? But like my thinking was, can I set this up and just have 30 minutes a month? I'll run you through what I'm doing, what I'm planning to do, what my plans are, and you either call bullshit or you tell me, hey, I would think about this another way. And then I go and I do my shit and then come back and like, this worked, this didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And
Gallup actually has a tool, and I really like that because it's called like the personal board of directors, right?
Yeah.
There's this assessment called the builder profile, and it talks about the 10 talents that you could have to build a business, but how do you focus on your top 4? So my top 4 talents are knowledge, determination, disruption, and relationship. So the way that whenever I approach a business, I try to figure out, what do I know, what do I not know, like who can I leverage. And if it's something that I'm really passionate about, I'm just gonna work really hard. And then there's also delegator, selling, independence. There's profitability and confidence, and there's a few other ones. But what's really cool is that it also talks about like out of the 3 types of builders, which one are you? There's a rainmaker, conductor, and expert, and it shares that you need to have these 3 types of people in your business to make sure that you can grow and scale in the next 3 to 5 years. It's not saying that. And as founder, you're probably doing all 3 at once, but you need someone who's very profitable oriented, someone who can focus on bringing harmony to the team, and someone focuses. And they have like these templates, so definitely encourage people to check it out. There's a book called Born to Build that comes with a free assessment and has a lot of these templates, but it talks similar like this. Who is your coach? Who is your mentor? Who is your role model? And it lists these different personas. And then I'll also ask you, how close are you with them? What type of interaction you need from them, and how often are you meeting with them? And so it also even goes a little bit deeper, similar to what you're sharing. I was like, if there's a mentor of or there's a role model of yours, but I'm not close with them right now, maybe I can work on that. And then if you were too close with them, what type of relationship would you want to have with them? And then that's also how you can be really intentional with people that you're trying to help, that you're looking for help in your life.
I'll check that out. I like it. Sweet. And I end every show with a last question. So I ask past guests to give me a question for a future guest, and then I'll ask you to give me one as well. So your question is, what is it that makes you fundamentally human?
What is it that makes me fundamentally human? The fact that I have emotions when it comes to living my life in service of others, that I have it in me to want to serve others, that I have it in me to cry, laugh, and enjoy the human experience. I think that's what makes us human, that we strive for finding belonging, that we try to strive for finding our community and try to make our community better, and see what it does for us and what it does for people, and to enjoy and be grateful for all the experience that comes with it. I think that's what makes us human, the roller coasters and trials and tribulations, but all the things and joy that we get from making people happy.
I like that. It felt like you had that prepared, but no, very, very well said. What's your question for a future guest?
Well, then I have to ask about their community. It's like, what is your favorite community, and what is it about that community that keeps you coming back to it?
Okay, sweet. Well, that's all I had. Thank you for coming on. Where can listeners find you? What do you want to plug? What can we link in the description?
Yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. We're a few friends of mine are actually looking to create a mastermind group. So if anyone that is in a position or interested in building a community, then we're creating really small groups of people, and we're actually piloting this. This is probably the first time I'm sharing this with anyone publicly, that we're trying to create a group to figure out how we can be more intentional about community engagement.
Nice.
And I break it down to science, but there's also art to it. So I want to share, there's a lot of art and science when it comes to community building. There's a lot of data and metrics that we can leverage to understand how to have the right conversations. We're not using it to replace conversations, but we also understand the importance of collecting information to make sure we're intentional about it. And so there's a lot of science when it comes to how we build intentional communities. So feel free to reach out about that. And, just be available, I guess. I make myself available, in a lot of these events. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll see each other at some of these events in Austin.
Sweet. Cool. And I think this will come out in a couple of weeks. So if there's anything going on, then we'll link everything. But thank you for coming on.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for asking great questions.
Yeah. Thanks.